A fair-haired girl sits on her knees in front of a man, begging him to marry her. The heroine asks to be allowed to live here for 3 years and promises to be quieter than a mouse and then disappear unnoticed. The blonde man asks the girl why he should accept her proposal. The blonde starts to worry that she has nowhere to go if she gets kicked out of here. Then the main character tells the man that she knows his secret. After the girl tells something, the blonde guy grins. The man gets down on one knee and agrees to marry the blonde. Sometime later, the main character gets married to Duke Aslan Tortle. On this day, all the nobility discusses the Duke's terrible taste in women. The ladies do not understand how a girl from a simple family, who, moreover, is not a beauty, could attract such a man. The fair-haired girl knew from the very beginning what people would think when they found out that the Duke had decided to marry her. At the age of 10, the main character remembered her past life, in which she read the novel she is now inside. At first, the girl thought that these memories had nothing to do with her. However, everything in the heroine's life turned out as it was written in that book. Since childhood, the blonde felt that her fate was already predetermined, and she could do nothing about it. Now the girl is the Duchess of Tortle, as described in the novel. The main character pensively reflects on the fact that neither the sea current nor the wind can be changed. The Duchess's thoughts are interrupted by Aslan, who throws his jacket over his wife's shoulders. The blonde feels her pulse quicken because of this gesture of attention. The girl's heart also could not resist fate, and she ended up falling in love with this man. Looking at their family portrait, the heroine thinks that she is happy to be the Duke's wife by contract. The main thing is to be next to him. The girl looks dreamily at the painting, wishing that this happiness would never end. 3 years later, that very day came. The red-haired girl greets the blonde, introducing herself as Rosalina Ferradeau. Hearing the guest's name, the Duchess realizes with horror that she is the one who stole Aslan's heart in the novel. Rosalina happily says that she is indebted to the House of Tordel and is very glad to meet the Duchess. The main character doesn't have time to respond to this, as all her strength suddenly leaves her. The alarmed man manages to catch the unconscious girl. According to the novel, the main character, Aslan Tortle, fell in love with Rosalina Ferradeau at first sight. The Duke decided to live with the red-haired woman for the rest of his life, and so he broke off his marriage with his wife after 3 years. The man married Rosalina, making her his legal wife. After this, the novel never told the further fate of Aslan's ex-wife. The girl remained only Duchess Tordel, whose name was practically never mentioned in the novel. When the main character finally opens her eyes, she sees her husband's worried face in front of her. After his wife woke up, the fair-haired man immediately got up from his place to call the doctor. However, the main character stops him, trying to convince the man that she is completely fine. Aslan insistently asks his wife to see a doctor since she fainted for no reason. The blonde says she was simply surprised that the Duke suddenly brought home a strange girl. The Duchess apologizes for ruining the whole atmosphere because the red-haired one is Aslan's guest. To this, the fair-haired man says that it is his fault that he brought the guest without telling his wife. The man tells the main character that the red-haired woman is his distant relative, and he accidentally met her and learned about her difficult situation. According to the plot, Rosalina suddenly became an orphan and was sold to a rich old man to cover her debts, and Aslan accidentally met her and promised to take care of her. The Duke promises his wife that the red-haired woman will not stay with them for long and will start a new life by next spring, having met a good man. The man asks his wife to allow Rosalind to stay on their estate for a year. The main character realizes that nothing will change even if she kicks the girl out now. The Duchess puts on a false smile, agreeing to her husband's request. Aslan smiles happily, thanking his husband for his understanding. Rosalind, along with the other ladies, discusses the gifts and letters the Duke gave her. The red-haired one assures the girls that this is just concern on Aslan's part since she only recently arrived here and doesn't know anything yet. The ladies call Rosalind noble, saying that they would not be surprised if she were the mistress of this mansion. At this, the cheeks of the Duke's distant relative blush, and she says that this mansion already has its own mistress. At this moment, Duchess Tordel enters the room, smiling awkwardly. The ladies' glances, filled with hostility, are directed at the main character. The fair-haired girl looks away because no matter how hard she tried, the noble ladies still did not accept her. The Duchess does not understand how Rosalina was able to achieve everyone's favor, which she failed to do in these 3 years. The red-haired woman joyfully greets the Duke's wife. The girl says that she wanted to visit the main character, but she couldn't because she was told that she was still sick. The blonde thanks him for his concern, assuring him that she is completely fine. Rosalind tells the Duchess that she would like to see her sooner to ask her something. The red-haired girl takes the girl by the arm and leads her away from the room where the other ladies are. A distant relative of the Duke admits that she has heard strange rumors from other noble ladies. Rosalina says that many people believe that Aslan kidnapped the Duchess and forced her to marry him. This news shocks the main character. The red-haired girl says that she didn't believe it at all because she saw that the Duke was not such a reckless person. However, the girl still decides to clarify whether this rumor is nonsense. The fair-haired girl remembers how her father called Aslan a criminal who kidnapped his daughter and forced her to marry him. The noble ladies also could not understand why the Duke was so stubborn, even if his bride's family was against this marriage. The men could not understand how fascinated the blonde was by the girl, since they had never heard the name Helena Lariston. The main character expressed doubts about how society speaks about them. However, Helena's husband replied that everything was happening the way she wanted, because the fair-haired girl married him so that her parents would not touch her. The Duchess confidently tells Rosalind that Aslan is a very caring person. The heroine asks not to believe this rumor, after which she decides to leave first. The red-haired girl can only look in surprise at the girl leaving. Aslan Tortle is the only heir of a family with a centuries-old history, who has everything: power, wealth, and a beautiful appearance. Helena can't stop beating herself up over how perfect the Duke was until she came along. However, the blonde understands that she had no other choice, and all this was for the sake of escaping from the Lariston family. As a child, the main character almost died because of a carriage rushing towards her. But everything ended well, and the transport managed to stop at the very last moment. Then a woman approached the girl and, with tears in her eyes, joyfully called her Helena. The stranger hugs the heroine tightly, who tries to convince her that this name does not belong to her. A man runs up to the woman, telling her to finally come to her senses because Helena is dead. However, the stranger notices the enormous resemblance between the dead girl and the one who is now standing in front of him. The man grabs the child by the chin and says that of all the children they have seen, she looks most like Helena. The stranger smirks and asks the child how old she is. That same night, the main character was kidnapped from her home. The parents of the girl, whose real name is Rayla, tried to catch up with the kidnappers. However, the criminals escaped into the forest on horses. From that day on, the fair-haired girl became Helena Lariston for the sake of the lady who went mad because of her dead daughter. The head of the Lariston family told the heroine that if she played the role of Helena well, she would be able to live her life as a noblewoman. However, the man warned that if the girl failed like the two who came before her, she would also die. Looking at the distraught woman, the maids laughed because the count was doing everything to avoid losing his wife's inheritance. Rayla Violet was constantly waiting for the moment when Mrs. Lariston would die and she would finally be able to return to her former life. And then came the day that the main character had been waiting for, but the count did not let her go. The servant told the man that the countess had bequeathed all her property to her daughter, and until she became an adult, no one had the right to touch the inheritance. The head of the family ordered Helena to be killed because if she died before marriage, everything would go to him. However, there was another condition in the will which stipulated that the entire inheritance should be donated to God if her daughter died before coming of age. Hearing this, the enraged count decided to lock Helena in the attic until she came of age. At this point, the heroine began to be treated worse than a servant. Although it was very difficult for the girl, she felt relief since she no longer had to pretend to be someone else. This peace did not last long, since after the death of the countess, the count's mistress became his second wife, and Glock, the illegitimate son of the count, made Rayla's life hell. Every time the guy approached the blonde, her body began to tremble. The count's second wife was worried that her son's communication with Helena would lead him down the wrong path. The woman's husband asked her to be patient with him a little longer, saying that he would soon sort everything out. To show that Helena was still alive, she was sometimes forced to take part in social events. On one of them, the blonde noticed that someone had dropped their handkerchief. The main character picked up the scarf and called out to its owner to return the item. However, when the man turned towards the girl, she was speechless because of his beauty. The owner of the scarf introduced himself as Aslan Tordal and thanked the lady for her help, saying that this thing was very dear to him. Hearing this name, the heroine felt that she had heard it somewhere before. Aslan asked the stranger to tell him her name, and Helena Lariston stammered it out. The blonde man decided to thank the girl for her help by fulfilling one of her wishes. However, the main character immediately refused the offer, believing that she had done nothing wrong. The man held out one of his cufflinks, saying that if she had a request in the future, she should come to the Tordal mansion and show it to him. At parting, Aslan expressed the hope of seeing Helena Lariston again. Already lying on the attic floor, the main character tries to remember where she could have heard the name of that man. Suddenly it dawns on the girl that Duke Tortle is the main character of one of the novels she has read. After this, the fair-haired girl realizes that in that story, the Duchess's name was the same as hers. However, Helena immediately dismisses these thoughts since she definitely cannot be Aslan's future wife because they will not meet again. The heroine decides to keep the cufflink as a keepsake and already wants to hide it, but is distracted by the person who entered. Glock enters his sister's room and reminds her that the Count's new wife wants to marry her off to a dying old man. The guy offers Helena to live with him rather than be sold. The brother wants to hug the blonde, but she breaks free from his grip. Glock smirks and asks the girl not to act so coldly towards him. The next moment, the heroine shudders as she hears her brother's words that he knows where her parents are now. Helena asks her brother how he knows her parents, to which he replies that they came here to find their daughter. The blonde excitedly asks what happened to her family. Glock says their father ordered the girl's parents to be killed before anything bad happened, after which the guy says that those people still managed to escape, like rats. Helena asks in a trembling voice where her family is now. Glock approaches his sister's ear and tells her to please him. Rosianna wants to know about it so much. The brother begins to untie the main character's dress, saying that if he is in a good mood, he can secretly find her parents without her father knowing. The blonde closes her eyes, thinking about how she needs to be patient in order to see her family again. At this moment, Rayla's thoughts were filled with her mother's words about how she should never hold back if someone offends her. The heroine takes the closest heavy thing to her and hits her brother on the head with it. The blonde's body begins to shake violently as she realizes what she just did. The shocked girl tries to understand what to do and how to act now. Suddenly, Helena's gaze stops on the handkerchief in which the Duke's cufflink is wrapped. The main character realizes that her family is looking for her, so she must escape from here and survive. The girl remembers Aslan's words that if she has a request for him, she can come to Tordel's mansion and show him this thing. Wet and frozen due to the bad weather, Helena stands before the Duke and asks in a trembling voice if he remembers her. The fair-haired girl states her name and reminds Aslan that at the recent banquet he told her to find him if she had a request. The blonde man looks at the girl carefully and then finally starts a conversation, saying that first, she needs to change her clothes. A man asks his guest why she is dressed so lightly on such a cold evening. Helena clutches her skirt awkwardly, apologizing for dirtying Duke Tordel's mansion. Aslan asks the fair-haired girl to first change into dry clothes, after which he will listen to her. The main character is helped to take a bath. The girl thinks with embarrassment that the smell of lilac that surrounds her is her favorite scent. After the bath, Helena is taken to a room to change into dry clothes. The fair-haired girl doesn't understand where the Duke could have gotten clothes in her size since he is alone and has no sisters. Already standing in front of Aslan, clean and in new clothes, the main character once again thanks him for his kindness. A man asks his guest what request she came to him with late at night. Helena falls to her knees and in a pleading tone asks the Duke to marry her. The heroine reflects on the fact that if she dies unmarried, all her property will go to her father. However, if the girl is killed while she is married, the inheritance will go to her husband. The fair-haired girl asks to live in this mansion for 3 years, after which she will quietly disappear. Aslan asks the main character why he should accept her offer. Helena informs the Duke that she has an inheritance from Countess Laurestin, which she will receive when she comes of age, after which she will give it to her husband. The fair-haired man says that he is not one of those who need property, since the Duchy of Tortel is not in poverty. The girl realizes that she has no choice but to use her knowledge. Helena Laurestin from the novel threatened Aslan and forced him to marry her for 3 years because she knew his secret. The fair-haired woman says something that the Duke never expected to hear. When the guest finishes speaking, the blonde man grins. The man gets down on one knee and agrees to marry Helena Laurestin. The main character looks at the sky, remembering how she became the Duchess of Tortel 3 years ago. Suddenly, not far from her, the girl hears someone talking about their arranged marriage. Aslan explains to the red-haired woman that, at Helena's request, they agreed to live as a married couple for 3 years. Rosalind says with disappointment that the Duke did not marry the Duchess because he loved her. The blonde man says gloomily that there was not a word about love in their contract, and they agreed not to bother each other during these 3 years. Helena is horrified by the man's words because she now understands that an arranged marriage cannot be desired. The girl gets up from her seat and decides to leave the main characters of the novel as soon as possible. In written history, there was never any room for love in the relationship between the Duke and Duchess. However, there was something that was different from the original plot of the novel. In the book, the blonde man never asked his wife to call him by his first name. The main character often noticed that Aslan was strangely kind to her. One day, a man brought his wife to a garden where a huge number of lilacs were planted. The blonde man prepared these flowers, especially as a wedding gift, so that the girl would have a place to relax. Because of Aslan's attention to Helena, she had hope, but her reputation was still as terrible as in the novel. The noble ladies often discussed the girl, calling her uneducated and ignorant of etiquette. At times when the main character felt terrible because of such words from others, her husband carefully told her not to overwork herself and to rest more. As a result, a hope was born in the soul of the fair-haired girl that the Duke loved her. However, Helena now realizes that this hope was wrong. The situation that the main character found herself in and the phrases that she heard from Aslan were exactly the same as in the novel. The Duchess finds it hard to breathe as she feels trapped in a fate that has already been determined. Before entering the mansion, the blonde loses consciousness. Outside the door to the Duchess's bedroom, the maids discuss their mistress's latest fainting spell. Helena opens her eyes and thinks about how, when she lived with the Lariston family, her body became very weak due to constant stress and abuse. Suddenly, the blonde feels a coolness. Someone put a wet towel on her forehead. In her delirium, the heroine imagines that she sees Aslan caring for her. However, the girl immediately dispels these thoughts, realizing that this cannot be her husband. Helena closes her eyes against the loud ringing in her ears, preventing her from hearing anything. Aslan looks at his wife with excitement in his eyes, asking her to open her eyes quickly. Jenna tells the Duke that she will look after the ladies so he can rest. The fair-haired man sharply answers the maid that he will stay with his wife and says not to let anyone in so as not to disturb Helena's rest. Before leaving, Jenna reports that Lady Rosalina has come to visit Lady Tortle, to which Aslan once again repeats his order. The Duke squeezes the blonde's hand, saying that he doesn't know what to do every time she faints. The blonde man kisses the girl's hand, asking her not to be sick for long. Rosalina asks the maid if she was correct in telling her who had come. Jenna looks away, awkwardly saying that the gentleman said not to let anyone in. Hearing this, the red-haired girl bites her lip in displeasure. The girl remembers how the fair-haired man, upon hearing that Mrs. Tortle had fainted, immediately jumped up from his seat. Rosalina doesn't understand why Aslan is so worried about Helena if they didn't marry for love. Looking at the portrait of the Tortle family, the red-haired one smiles, as the 3 years will soon be up and the Duke's marriage will come to an end. Lady Faridot is glad that Aslan will no longer have to be associated with someone who cannot properly play the role of a duchess. Rosalina smiles again, remembering what others have said about her being much better suited for the role. Many ladies were irritated by Helena because of her, Duke Tortle was surrounded by bad rumors. The girls thought that the fair-haired girl always looked around like a commoner, and unlike her, Rosalina was very graceful and self-confident. Aslan's distant relative was proud that in high society she was treated only with admiration. The red-haired woman notes that since Duke Tortle still hasn't had a child, it's obvious that he and his wife have a contract marriage without love. Rosalina is sure that the blonde man is too kind, so he simply could not turn away from the poor girl. The red-haired one intends to continue to act in order to achieve the position of Duchess of Tortle. Jenna notices that her mistress has finally come to her senses. The maid tells the fair-haired girl that the Duke was very worried about her because she had been ill for several days. The girl tells Helena that Aslan was with her the whole time but left for a short time as Lady Rosalina had to give him something important. Hearing the name of the red-haired girl, the main character's eyes become sad. The blonde clutches the blanket, realizing it's time to leave. Helena asks Jenna what date it is today. Hearing the maid's answer, the Duchess's mood improves because tomorrow is her birthday. However, this holiday does not belong to Helena Lariston, but to Rayla Violet. The girl warmly recalls Aslan's words that he would always congratulate her on her real birthday. The blonde asks herself if she can be a little selfish and spend her last day with her husband. Helena asks Jenna to help her wash and change clothes so she can meet her husband to ask for something. The main character knocks on her husband's office door, but receives no answer. One of the servants tells the girl that Duke Tortle has gone somewhere today. Suddenly, Helena notices a carriage that has just arrived through the window. The fair-haired woman is initially happy about her husband's arrival, but the next moment the smile disappears from her face. Aslan does not come out alone. A sweetly smiling Rosalina comes out of the carriage after him. The heroes are chatting enthusiastically about something, being in very close contact. Helena looks worriedly at how harmoniously Rosalina looks next to Aslan. The Duke notices something in the window and abruptly turns his gaze to it.